Digital privacy is a really, really complicated topic, and obtaining digital privacy requires some really complex and sometimes really convoluted techniques. We've got things like cryptography, which to fully understand the way that modern cryptography works, you pretty much need to be a genius level mathematician. We've got things like really complicated routing techniques like onion routing and other kinds of obfuscation and security that are generally really hard to understand and to the average person might seem like really crazy lengths to go in order to try and obtain privacy. But in the real world, in the world that we live and breathe and walk around in, privacy doesn't quite manifest in the same way. A lot of the time when we think about privacy in the real world, it might be as simple as closing a door or whispering to somebody, lowering your voice so that other people aren't going to overhear you. And on the flip side of things as well, it's really obvious when someone's privacy in the real world is being invaded. If somebody's clearly staring at somebody or following them around or trying to break into your house or listening to a conversation that you're having with a friend, you get this really gross, icky feeling, and there's a real sense that everybody understands that someone's privacy is being invaded, something wrong is happening here. But in the digital world, we don't necessarily get this same feeling. It can be really hard to notice when people's privacy is being invaded, and it's hard to feel that sense of outrage when you just see yet another article come out about, some company, whether it be Meta or whoever, who's accidentally or is exploiting deliberately millions and millions of people's data and therefore their privacy. But I think there's a lot that we can learn from the way that we treat privacy in the real world and the way that we conceive of it, and there are some things that have been a little bit lost in translation, some things that we've tried to bring across but failed to really properly translate into the digital world. So let's talk a little bit about them. The first thing that I want to bring up is a really humble and maybe even a little bit of a silly example, but this is something that I had and used at my home when I was growing up out in the suburbs, and it is really simple, a fake rock. Okay, so there's this little contraption, and we'll put a picture up of it here, where you can have a little hollowed out fake, sometimes it's ceramic or whatever, rock that just looks like a normal rock that you would have in your garden. Of course, the idea is that you put your house key into it, and that's the key that unlocks the front door, so you can leave it there in case you accidentally lock yourself out, or you've got people coming over to visit, or you need a friend to drop by and pick something up from your place or something, anything. Generally speaking, it's really simple. A lot of houses use something like this, right? And if you were to translate this into the digital world, this would be really ridiculous, like keeping the key for the thing that you're trying to keep secure or keep key private right next to it would be a really stupid way to go about things. But in the real world, this actually works pretty well. It's a really sort of juvenile way of trying to obfuscate the key, right? Putting it inside a rock and just putting it in the garden. But the thing is that people don't necessarily have good access to that area. If a stranger walks into your front yard and starts sort of looking around and, ruffling through all of the leaves, trying to look for something, and they clearly look out of place, well, there's kind of this social contract a lot of people are going to adhere to. They're going to realize that somebody isn't supposed to be there, or that something doesn't quite seem right, or maybe the person who actually occupies the house is going to come home and see you and wonder what the heck you're doing. So it's really not easy to restrict access in the same way in a digital context compared to a physical context, right? And a really simple obfuscation technique like hiding your house key in a small fake rock is probably a good way to jeopardize the security and privacy of whatever it is that you're trying to protect. And on top of this, this is especially an issue when it comes to the internet, right? And there's this old saying that, when things go on the internet, they stay there. It's really hard to restrict people's ability to access things which are internet connected. So that's one aspect of things. The other aspect that I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to go way back in history, back to ye old days, when paper was really expensive. Yeah, that's how far back I'm going. So paper was really expensive, and because of this, envelopes weren't really a thing. Obviously, envelopes are a metaphor that's used a lot in terms of security, because you can put things inside the envelope, and if the envelope is broken, then the security of that thing might be compromised, right? Well, I'm going a little bit further back because I like this example a little bit more. So envelopes didn't really exist, but people used to use these really complex techniques called letter locking, where you would kind of cut and fold the piece of parchment or paper that was going to be the letter in such a way that you would fold it back on itself, almost it being its own envelope. And you would have to tear the paper or destroy it or alter it in a way that couldn't be undone in order to then open it and be able to read the contents of the letter. And obviously there are ways to reproduce this cryptographically, or at least some kind of approximation of it, right? But it really captures this idea, I think, of things in the real world and the ability to destroy or alter something permanently in the physical world translates a lot better. Whereas in the digital world, it's a lot harder to imagine how this works. Things can obviously be copied really easily, they can be duplicated, they can be opened and resealed from time to time, and it makes things a lot more complex. It's hard to have assurances, whereas if you see one of these old letter locking letters and you see that it's been torn, it's very clear what has happened, right? And the same thing goes with a piece of paper. If you have a piece of paper and you decide, well, I want to destroy the piece of information that's on this piece of paper, well, you can take a match and set it on fire and burn it, and boom, it's gone. The piece of information that was on that paper, assuming that that's the only way that the information was stored, it's gone. It no longer exists, and you can be 100% certain. Whereas these assurances, once again, don't really exist in the digital world, even when you delete things. So there are some digital forensics research that's been done that has shown that with SSDs, which is how a lot of data, most data, is stored these days, when you delete things, it's generally possible to recover it even after it's been deleted. Because of the actual architecture and infrastructure of the way that it physically works, deleting information and deleting data is really complex, and therefore it's often not done correctly, and it can be possible to recover it. So it's hard to know, and once again, arcing back to that once you put something on the internet, it's going to be there forever. It's really hard to know for sure that something is gone, that that thing has been deleted. Once it's committed to the digital realm, it's really hard to undo that. Whereas if you write something down on a piece of paper, well, it's pretty easy to undo that. So those are just two areas of privacy where still, after all of the extremely complex ways that we've come up with to try and protect people's digital privacy, arguably we're still falling well short of the way that it was before a computer ever existed. So we've still got a long way to go, but I think that we can draw from and learn from these ways that we used to stay private in the past and these physical ways that we had to protect privacy, as well as taking a little bit of inspiration and motivation from them as well, because it really does show that people do have a human impulse, a natural impulse to want to have privacy in their lives, right? So we can take this and really feel confident that privacy is something that matters. It's just something that has been abstracted away a lot of the time in the digital world. But we're still working hard, we're always doing the best that we can, and hopefully things will be able to improve in the future. So until next time.